very near future is changing the process and how these funds get allocated and incorporating them into the same process as our FCSS funding. So I just wanted to put that out there for council.
Thank you, Councillor.
Just to close, if I may,
Certainly, and then Councillor Buckingham. Go ahead, Councillor.
just to close out, I guess that, for example, the youth program, that going a few years ago. And I know there was some controversy how it started in terms of financing by taxing the retailers. And I know that was an issue with me, that maybe little stores alike were paying a fair amount of money towards the program. There was nothing wrong with the program, it was just the way we were going about providing the funding. In this case, with the youth, targeting the youth to stay away from smoking and other things like that, that's a lifelong journey for all of us. And I just wondered if, for example, they were getting their fair share, $2,000. That's really maybe what struck a chord with me. So I'll leave it at that.
I'll give Councillor Buckingham and then I'll come back and
Okay,
then
what performance on that?
Councillor Buckingham.
Thank you, Worship. No, I think it's as fair as it possibly can be. If you just look at the screen there where it's at, you've got a $2,000 ask, a $2,000 allocation, right? The Interval Home Society asked for $20,000 and had the biggest miss if you're going to look at it that way, right? They were asking for 20, got 14-1. Everybody else got exactly what they asked for. So it wasn't like there was groups that were completely excluded that applied for this funding. So it's pretty much fair across the board from all the asks were and what the committees decided in my opinion.
And if I can, Councillor Buckingham.
Yeah, just basically to echo, there's no organization that applied that didn't get funding. So the Livingston Area Drug Strategy, although they only applied for $2,000, that's all they got was $2,000. We're not, in the history, we're not really giving above and beyond of what their initial ask is for their programming. So I guess in my opinion is that there's exactly what you have done, I think is the allocation process that is fair.
And if I can, Councillor Baker, make it maybe Interval Home now includes the youth center. So I think that might be that catch-22.
Okay, maybe that's the answer.
Yeah, that might be your answer, as I got thinking about that as you're questioning. Because they've rolled the two boards of directors together and created one organization that oversees the youth center, as well as Interval Home. I can understand.
It's kind of close. I was only personal reflection.
Things like that. So
Good point, Commissioner.
I think that might,
Totally forgot that.
yeah, that might just fill in the blank a little bit from that perspective. It will show, direct towards you, that it goes into the official organization of society.
I see that. But I guess, just, if you ask for lots and get cut back, you still got lots. You don't ask for too much, you don't get any more.
Yeah, and I guess that would be the application, the no passive works extensively with those
Yeah.
folks. And that was definitely.
But I see how the connection.
Any further discussion before I call for the final question? Not seeing any, all in favor?
As a reminder, all members of council are obligated to declare a conflict of interest or pecuniary interest in section 133 of the Westminster Charter regarding any item on this agenda.
Opportunity on the agenda, so we will return back to our agenda. Sincere for your work, thank you very much. Yeah, thank you.
So thanks for having me back.
Council
And
Bennett.
I'll be with the same.
About 6 months ago. So
Thank you, Council.
not a lot of changes in
Any other items? No.
although
Thank you very much.
the marketplace in the last
Is there
48, 72
call for
hours.
any additions or deletions to this agenda?
But I thought that
Now, seeing none, I will look for council's direction.
no resolution there. Also take the opportunity to come by and keep you guys updated.
The agenda date of March 25th.
So that's not the town anyways.
Any
So,
further comments before I call for the question?
Table that are
Not seeing any, all in favor?
as our name suggests, we
Opposed?
represent as well
Carried.
as gas producers.
Do we want
We have
to
60 members.
We will minutes, the direction of council.
Gas.
Mr. Buckingham.
With the regular council minutes. of March
I
11th.
think I probably started with just about last time I was here.
Second.
But, just for context,
Council
this
Pagno.
is updated from,
Any further comments or questions? before I
the
call for the question?
IEA, under the
Not
assumption
seeing
that
any, all in favor?
countries around the world take action on
Opposed?
climate change,
Carried.
based on their stated policies.
Is there any business
The world
around
is still going to
this?
need more oil and natural gas.
Not seeing any, we'll move on to new business. Item
So I
number
was like,
6.
so start there. Question,
6.4.
not whether it's going to use the resources.
Chief Financial.
But.
Good afternoon, Your Worship and Council. Please present 6.4.
And so obviously it's online, feel that they're economic and environmental.
Thank you, Mayor, Council.
The world sourcing their energy from.
We have before you the Leominster Downtown Business Improvement District
This is
dissolution.
our oil price slide.
We're recommending that council accept the amount of $179,144.01 from the Leominster Downtown Business Improvement District as of December 31st by transferring the funds into a reserve for the downtown improvement driven by the downtown development plan of the Dorp.
Last year, which was.
A specified audit procedure engagement was conducted by Lucky and Associates LLP and recorded amount of $179,144.01 for their remaining account balances for the Leominster Downtown Business
And to give you a
Improvement
sense,
District.
obviously, we don't know what is that.
The district was created in '89 to improve and beautify and maintain the downtown area. In addition, an establishing bylaw 31 provided them the authority to promote the area as a business and shopping area and to conduct studies and prepare designs to benefit their cause. Bylaw 4113 was an amendment to the original bylaw, and on April 16, 2018, a motion for dissolution of the downtown business improvement.
Respond to those demand changes. The other thing that happened is as industry and in particular the oil producing exporting countries or OPEC, we're looking at how to respond to that change in the demand side. And so OPEC countries have been working closely with Russia of late to manage supply around the world to account for various demand changes in the world oil market. As they traditionally do, OPEC tries to set prices around the world based on their own economic interests. They tried to reach a deal to cut supply as a result of coronavirus. And those talks failed over the course of the weekend, and in particular failed between Saudi Arabia and Russia. As a result of that failure, Saudi Arabia has said that they're going to increase their oil production. Despite the fact that demand is off significantly, they've indicated they're going to increase their supply significantly. And so we saw when markets opened yesterday afternoon overseas, we saw the largest single decline in oil prices since 1991 during the midst of the Gulf War. And so Brent crude, was headed towards $30. It's since rebounded a bit. It's trading about $34 today. But Brent crude, of course, is the world price for crude oil and is the highest trading price of all different kinds. So we've seen significant impact in the last 24 hours to markets. And it's too early to say, obviously, what those impacts will be. Too early to say, certainly, how long that price war may or may not last. At some point in these things, they resolve because of, economic interests of those OPEC countries. But there is probably going to be quite a bit of pain in the short term, at least, as a result of these market swings, which are significant. So Canadian producers had already, as a result of coronavirus, announced cuts to their capital expenditures for the year. Obviously, they'll be taking a look at markets today and starting to reevaluate what that looks like. So the CAP investment forecast, which we put out a couple months ago before all this hit, is now probably quite irrelevant. We were predicting a fairly positive, but kind of flat year. We're predicting capital investment would be up a little bit, drilling would be down a little bit, but pretty flat. Obviously, the events of the last few days changed that pretty dramatically, not knowing either the full impacts of coronavirus or the full impacts of this price war. So I'll just quickly give you an update on the oil pipelines. Again, I talked about this last time I was here, but since then there have been some positive moves, I would say. Both Enbridge Line 3 and Keystone XL have been overcoming significant port challenges that they were facing at the time I was here. And so those are proceeding along quite nicely. Likewise, Trans Mountain is kind of back on track for now. Not to say that there couldn't be additional challenges in the next little while, but most recently the Supreme Court decided that they would not hear an appeal of the recent positive decision allowing Trans Mountain to go forward. So all three of those projects seem to be somewhat on track for now. And Ridgeline 3 at this point is likely to be in service later this year. Keystone XL and Trans Mountain, we're still probably looking sometime early 2022. But obviously, despite recent events, this is our significant medium and long-term challenge is getting additional pipeline capacity to move our product to market. That was the driver behind curtailment, which I would have talked about last time I was here. So that's all good news. Talk a little bit about some of the things we're working on federally and provincially. Won't go into too much detail. I'll have to take questions, but again, I talked mostly about these issues last time I was here. The one thing I'll mention is methane equivalency. So, the federal government and the provinces over the course of the last number of years have announced a desire to reduce methane emissions from the upstream oil and gas industry by between 40 and 45%. Industry has felt that we can meet those targets in a reasonable way. And the provinces have implemented their regulatory frameworks, BC, Alberta, and Saskatchewan. The challenge that we have now is that, much like the carbon tax, which is federally backstopped, the federal government needs to make a decision on whether they feel those provincial regulatory frameworks around methane meet federal targets. Obviously, we feel they do, the provinces feel they do, but the federal government has not taken that decision yet. So currently, we're being regulated by both the federal government and the provincial governments when it comes to methane reduction strategies. This has a significant cost impact to the industry trying to comply with both regulatory frameworks. And so we're working to get that federal equivalency in place so that the federal government then backs out of that sector, or out of that regulatory area. Obviously, with the heavy crude that you guys have here, methane has been a significant concern for this particular region. So the sooner we can get that equivalency for two jurisdictions here, the better that will be. So again, I don't think there's a lot of update on the other ones since I was here, so I'll maybe just leave it there and hopefully leave lots of time for questions for you guys. So thank you again.
Thank you, Chris, for your presentation. Questions, comments? I guess, Chris, the question I'm sure is on everybody's mind in the oil and gas industry, as well as our city and many others in Alberta and Saskatchewan. This could change again overnight.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're seeing something and no one knows how long it could be, a day, a week, a month.
That's right. Yeah, the coronavirus is a bit of a different case. I think that's probably a bit, with us for a little while. Yeah, that political dynamic between Saudi Arabia and Russia and whatever other interests may be on the mind, those can change very quickly, based on political decisions that they are going to take. So yeah, it's really hard to say what we're in for this year.
Yeah, it's a guess, and by golly, right now, until someone flinches, as they say in this business, they're both standing off.
Yeah.
I guess one other question I'll bring up is, I hear a lot of comments through the school system about the direction that there's talk about oil and gas, and is CAP actually working with the Department of Education or spearheading some sort of information package that gets back to for the industry to help defend the industry in the education system, where the green side is being presented is the other side being presented.
Yeah.
So that's a question that's been asked by people that have kids in school, and I go, I'm not sure. So
yeah,
this might be a good opportunity.
For sure. So CAP hasn't been directly involved in conversation on curriculum and that sort of thing in school. But we do have a great partnership with Canadian Geographic, who spends a lot of time with teachers and puts particular programming in place in schools. So we've worked with them over the last number of years with what they call their Energy IQ program. The basis of that is kind of a giant floor map that fits a school gymnasium where kids can actually walk around and interact with the map, the different exercises there, talks about energy in all its forms and where it comes from, how it's transmitted. So it's not just about oil and gas, but there's certainly obviously a big component about oil and gas, what its impacts are, where it comes from, and how to get it to market. So that's been our primary vehicle there, and Canadian Geographic has been a great partner in that.
Terrific. Thank you.
Okay.
Any other comments, questions? Well, thank you, Chris,
Thanks
for
for
the
that.
update.
Thanks very much.
Appreciate you making the trip out to the Shortmaster. We're always good to see you and all members of CAP. And, we all just stay with the news like everyone else and see where the good and the bad goes.
Okay, good. Thanks very much.
Take care.
Moving on back to agenda item 6.1.2. City Manager.
Thank you, Your Worship, to present 6.1.2 Lakeland Library Region Board. What the last Dawn Stank present.
Thank you, City Manager. Before you, we have the Lakeland Library Regional Board appointment. And administration is looking for council's recommendation that council approve the appointment of Dwayne Hoffus as one of the 2 representatives of the Lloydminster Public Library to the Lakeland Library Regional Board for a 3-year term expiring December 31st, 2022. The Lloydminster Public Library is recommending Dwayne Hoffus to be appointed to the Lakeland Library Regional Board for a period of 3-year term. The regional board is represented by 2 members of the Lloydminster Public Library. The appointment of Dwayne Hoffus will fill a vacant position. Past practice has been for the City Council to appoint members to the Library Board and regional boards. Just from a government's perspective, the Lloydminster Charter is silent on which provincial library act is followed in the city. Additionally, there are currently no city bylaw establishing municipal library board to govern the Lloydminster Public Library. So I'll pass it back to you, Your Worship. This is something we do on an annual basis. So as the library board provides recommendations for both their local board and regional boards, we've always brought them forward to council for a recommendation to appoint.
Thank you, Secretary Manager Stank. Questions, comments? Councilor.
Thanks. Is Dwayne a new appointment, or if not, who's he replacing?
Yeah, I probably pass this on to Councillor Mendrell, but as far as I know, Dwayne Hoffs is a fairly new representative on the board within the last year and has expressed interest to be on the regional board, and the board has reviewed and provided that as a recommendation.
He's new to the board in the last part of 2019. There was a board member that's no longer on the board,
Okay.
and so that does result in a vacancy. Dwayne has a lot of experience in HR and will be an asset to this committee. So.
Thank you, Councilor Bill. Any other questions or comments? With that, I'll look for direction from City Council on the recommendation. Councilor Peggy.
That council approved the appointment of Dwayne Hoffus as one of 2 representatives of the Lloydminster Public Library to the Lakeland Library Region Board for a 3-year term expiring December 31st, 2022.
Seconder. Councilor Kitchuk. Any further discussion before I call for the question? Not seeing any. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Moving on to 6.1.3. Second Manager Stank.
Thank you, Your Worship. Second part of this is that administration is looking for council's recommendation to approve the appointments of Ellison Moore and Linnell Aguinaldo, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, to the Lloydminster Public Library Board for a 3-year term from March 2020 to April 2023. The Lloydminster Board is recommending Ellison Moore and Linnell Aguinaldo to the appointment to their board for a 3-year term. Best practice has been for the city to appoint members to the Lloydminster Public Library Board, even though there is no legislative requirement to do so. Similar governance implications, Lloydminster Charter is silent, and this is an item we've always brought forward as a recommendation to appoint to the library board. I'll pass it back to you, Your Worship.
Second. Thank you, Second Manager Stank. Questions or comments?
I'll just make a comment with these 2 appointments. It's the first time in many years that the library board will actually have a full board with 10 members. Allison brings to the table, she's a CPA, so brings that finance background, which would be great for the library. As well, Leo has a marketing background and just, in general, great community minded. So both of them will be huge assets to the library.
Any other comments or questions? Thank you for filling in the blanks, Mr. Miguel. Much appreciated. Well, if there's no more further comments, I'll look for direction from council on 6.1.3, regarding recommendation. Councilor Fagin.
The council approved the appointments of Allison Moore and Lionel Igualo to the Lloydminster Public Library for a 3-year term from March 2020 to April 2023.
Seconder, Councilor Blanchard. Any further discussion before I call for the question? Not seeing any, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Moving on to 6.2. City Manager.
Thank you, Your Worship. Before you is the subject matter regarding the Weaver Park Campground caretaker residency. Administration is looking for council to provide direct administration to proceed with purchase and installation of living quarters for the Weaver Park Campground caretaker up to a maximum amount of $120,000 plus GST, and that the purchases be funded through the Recreation and Culture Reserve number 35170. And in addition, that mayor and city clerk be authorized to sign and seal all necessary documents. In 2019, a series of inspections took place at city facilities with the purpose of being to conduct hazard and vulnerability reviews in conjunction with the overall assessment of city facilities. The objective was to evaluate security and safety concerns. During the inspection of the Lloydminster Cultural and Science Center, serious and notable concerns arose as they related to the certain fire and building codes involving the Weaver Park Campground caretaker resident. Just to note, this residency is attached to the OTS building that's currently been discussed in council. To identify concerns, revealed that the Weaver Park Campground resident that is occupied from April to October of each year is not protected by a fire protection system. Additionally, there is not a viable fire separation between the Lloydminster Cultural and Science Center and the caretaker residence. Due to the seriousness of this situation, it is being determined that an alternative resident will be required for the Weaver Park Campground caretaker. Administration is in the process of investigating options for alternative living quarters, which includes purchasing a park model unit. Administration is recommending that council move forward with finding suitable living quarters for the Weaver Park Campground caretaker and proceed with the purchase and installation of living quarters in Weaver Park Campground. The former Weaver Park Campground caretaker residence will continue to be used as an office until such time a new one is put into place if required. Budget implications, it's estimated that the cost of the purchase for the living quarters along with moving and installing the unit will cost at a maximum of $120,000 plus GST, and that funds will be allocated from the Recreation and Culture Reserve number 35170. I'll pass it back to you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Executive Manager. Questions and comments, Councilor Blanchard.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just the one question I have that's kind of stuck out to me last week was, if we've got these serious safety concerns with fire suppression and all these different things, we can still use it as an office?
Yes, the biggest issue is having people sleeping in the area during the day. It isn't as big of a concern. We have reviewed that, and the discussion is that as an office it would be permitted. It's just when it comes to sleeping quarters, there was a high recommendation to permit that.
Yeah, makes total sense. Thank you.
Executive Manager stating, I imagine we have a contract with caretaker. In our contract as a city, we are required to supply residents, I would suspect.
You are correct, Your Worship.
So is this, I'm not sure how long the contract is with the caretaker. Would this be such a facility or such a living quarters that when that contract's up, should a different caretaker become whatever, they decide this isn't the living quarter that they want, are we able to move that to a different location? Should it?
Yeah, the unit we're looking at is fully movable and would be suffice for many, many years in the future. So after this contract expires, When a new bid goes out and a new caretaker is hired, they would also live in this residency or this trailer. It's not a normal RV trailer, it's what they consider a park model, so you put wheels under it, you tow it, you set it down with the intent of moving it, you know, once or twice or 3 times in its lifespan, not towing it down the road on a regular basis, so.
Perfect.
Councilor Forrest.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, just as far as this goes, I know we've talked quite a bit about the Cultural and Science Center, and then within the report, there's been, suggestions on what to do with the buildings there. Just to make sure I'm totally clear, is that the long-term plan for Weaver Park and the campground, that all hasn't really changed, so that, in the foreseeable future, the way it operates right now is essentially how it's going to continue to operate.
That is correct.
Okay. And I think that's what's important, is because there's a lot of moving parts here with what's going on in that area, but in a way this is a separate issue, but just somewhat related as the two buildings are attached. But this is still something that we need to deal with either way. The only other question I have is, so I was looking through my notes and I don't recall seeing specifically this one within the budget.
That is correct. It was missed on our 2020 capital budget ask, and due to our need to have something in place prior to April, we did consider bringing it back through the budget readjustment, but with the timing and everything else, we felt we needed to bring this forward to council outside of that. It is funded through that reserve, which we discussed and worked with finance on that. Yes, it is an unbudgeted item, and my understanding is there's no impact to tax for that.
Okay, and I think that's what's important, is that we know and understand whether or not there was an impact on whether or not that changes the mill rate discussion that's coming up in the next few months. But then the other side of that is whether or not there was anything that reserve portion could have been already allocated to. And when I say that, I mean, quite often we have projects that are midway through or didn't get started all the way, so then what that reserve is truly for something else that was intended to be done in 2019 but is now being pushed to 2020. So that reserve is only kind of a reserve, but what you're suggesting is this is unallocated funds from a reserve that we are now allocating funds to in the current year without affecting the tax rate.
Thanks for the question. All of the carry forwards for capital are out of a capital allocation reserve. So
Okay.
it's a specific reserve for those carry forwards. Any reserves that are established like this one is established with the fund, and we haven't determined what we will be taking out of there because we're building those reserves for the future.
Okay, thank you. And then the other part that's important in this is that some other project isn't being pushed off because of it, and for the way that this is being done, there's not some project that is being deferred to another year because of doing this. Thank you, I think that answers.
Yeah, we're not deferring anything else.
Thank you.
Councilor Craig.
Thank you, Worship. But just wondering on the size of a park model, the ones that I've seen are usually a 1-bedroom and they might have a 2nd bedroom attached.
Yeah, we haven't purchased anything
No.
yet, so we have done some investigation and have found a suitable unit that does have a second sleeping area, a lot smaller. I think it's bunks, but would have a sleeping quarter if the caretaker had younger children to accommodate.
So do you think 2 bedrooms is going to be, that should be enough? If that's-
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. Nope, just want to make sure that we're not selling ourselves short of getting, compared to a regular modular home.
I guess that was the question. Thank you, Councillor. When we have to supply accommodation to the caretaker, but it is our accommodation choice. So if a caretaker applied for the contract, they would be aware of what was available going forward. And I presume we've had a conversation with the current caretaker, what their requirements are, or his requirements.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly the conversations our manager of Parks and Green Spaces has had. It's something I can definitely dig into a little bit deeper and provide some information back to council. But at the end of the day, these living quarters are going to be better than what we currently provide today. So I think it will be well received, but I will do some more investigation into that and definitely provide that feedback to you, council.
Thank you. I appreciate Councilor Monroe's concern too, and I think when you supply it, from what I understand, as a supplier of something, they bid on it, they know what they're bidding on. This one's a little different because we have an existing contract that's still in place with one provider, but going forward, if that provider was to bid again or a new contractor was to come forward, they would know that's what they get. We don't get into that problem that you come back to council and say we need a 3-bedroom because we don't.
Yeah, no, exactly. This will be the residency going forward.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Baker.
Your Worship, when I read this, I looked at it as a long-term thing. And I think it's important that whatever we purchase to do this, we have to have a place where they, and they're used year-round.
No, the residency is only occupied from, start of April or mid-April till the end of October type thing. So just during spring, summer, fall.
But we're going to build this on steel piles or on
Yeah, just
winterized and all that kind of
it's a park model, so it would be similar to what you would find under a mobile home, which that area is not zoned for that. So that's one of the things we've taken into consideration. But you would move it in and you would put it onto blocks and set it up for permanent, long-term.
And they would, as Councilor Baker said, it would be it'd be winterized annually and that kind of stuff.
Yes, we will look after it, however we need to.
The reason I asked Council Person's question was, we're taking money and spending it. We could be 10 years away before we have a new, who knows? We don't know. That's the issue.
No, absolutely.
And what's really important is the location. Because we're going to have to decide where you're going to build a new facility, a new museum, and that we're not on the road, so we have to move it. You know what I'm talking about?
Hearing it.
Don't pave the road and then dig it up to sewer line it. You just don't do that. So I think that, as Councilor Donald said, it's got to be, we got to give it some thought, no question.
Yeah, the plan is to put it on the #1
I know you do that.
site at Weaver Park and connect it to the services that are provided within Weaver Park. It wouldn't be set and serviced at a different location. It would just be one of the existing lots would be put on that from a permanent perspective.
And you build a grade up so the water will run away?
Yeah, it's already, Weaver Park's already graded. I think we have relatively good drainage there for the most part.
Thank you, Councilor Baker, for the question. Any other questions or comments? Not seeing any, I'll look for direction from council on 6.2.1, our campground, caretaker residence. Councilor Baker.
Move the council direct administration to proceed with the purchase and installation of the recorders for the Weaver Park Campground caretaker up to a maximum amount of $120,000 plus GST, and that the purchase be funded through the Recreation and Cultural Reserve, number 35170. In addition, the mayor and city clerk be authorized to sign and seal all necessary documents.
Seconder. Councilor Fagan. Any further discussion before I call for the question? Not seeing any. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Moving on to agenda item number 7, bylaws. City manager.
Thank you, Your Worship. For item 7.1, bylaw number 5, 2020, Francophone Education Region Property Tax Central. Scott Perry, for
Good afternoon, Your Worship Council.
Good afternoon, Scott.
The recommendation is that council grant second reading to bylaw number 05-2020, the FRAGNC Francophone Education Regional Property Tax Exemption Bylaw, and that council grant third and final reading to bylaw number 05-2020. Administration is looking for approval for a new bylaw to grant property tax exemption to the Francophone Region Authority Greater North Central Francophone Education Region as administered. Administration received information that the name of the Francophone Education Region was updated September 2019 by ministerial order to the Francophone Region Authority of Greater North Central Francophone Education Region. This has been updated in the bylaw and is here to be abbreviated as FRAGNC Francophone Education Region. Administration was first contacted by the Francophone Education Region, stating that they were exempt from property taxes as they are a school division established under the Act of Alberta. However, due to the wording in the Lloydminster Charter, the school division is required to own and occupy the property in order to qualify for exemption. In the rest of Alberta, the legislation states the school division can own or occupy the property and would be exempt from property taxes. Additionally, in Saskatchewan, under the Cities Act, Section 262 SIII states that the following are exempt from taxation, including properties that is leased and used in whole or in part by the person who would not be taxable with respect to the property if the person owned it. Once again, the Lloydminster Charter does not include this additional clause, as the Francophone Education Region does not own the property. They are not automatically exempt, as they would be elsewhere in Alberta, Saskatchewan. Administration obtained legal advice on alternative options for the Francophone school to obtain property tax exemptions. Section 3131 of the Lloydminster Charter is specific to nonprofit organizations and allows for the establishment of a bylaw exempting from taxation for property held by a nonprofit organization as defined in Section 183F of the Lloydminster Charter. Section 183F includes in the definition of nonprofit any other entity established under the law of Canada, Alberta, or Saskatchewan for a purpose other than to make a profit. The Francophone Education Region meets this definition as it was established as an education region under the ministerial order of the Government of Alberta. Section 313 does not require a school division to own the property, but allows it to be held by the nonprofit organization. This bylaw was first brought to council for first reading February 10th, 2020, regular council meeting. Council requested further information regarding provincial funding that the education region receives to offset costs of leasing property. Administration confirmed that the Francophone Education Region is responsible for property taxes per Section 313 of the lease. And that reads, the leasee agrees that it shall pay all municipal taxes assessed against or attributable to the demised premises through the term. Administration also confirmed that the Francophone Education Region only receives funding from Alberta Education Capital Planning in the amount equivalent to the annual rent less property taxes. The administration has spoken with many municipal contacts at Alberta Education and confirmed that provincial regulations were amended in 2015 so that education region leasing properties are now exempt from property taxes under Section 362 of the Municipal Government Act in Alberta. This bylaw received first reading February 24, 2020 regular council meeting. Option 1 is the council grant second reading to bylaw number 052020, and the council grant third and final reading to bylaw number 05-2020, or 2, the council not grant second and third reading to bylaw number 052020, or the council request additional information from the administration and the bylaw be brought forward at another regular council meeting. Under strategic plan, this item is in alignment with the following strategic items: internal, external communication and relationship building. Administration has worked with Francophone Education Region over the past year to look for alternate solutions for easing the tax burden on this school that would otherwise be exempt anywhere else in Alberta or Saskatchewan. Legal Review Administration obtained legal opinions confirming that the Francophone Education Region could be exempt from property tax under Section 295 or Section 313 of the Lloydminster Charter. The decision to exempt the property from taxation is solely at council's discretion. If council wishes to exempt the Francophone Education Region, a bylaw is required. And under budget implications, the tax loss will be $17,000, $12,000 will be municipal, and about $5,000 in education taxes. The only change to the bylaw from the first reading would be the name of the Francophone Society. I'll pass back to your worship for questions or comments.
Thank you, Scott. Questions, comments? Councilor Baker.
Well, Your Worship, I spoke about this first time around, and I really haven't changed. First of all, we made reference to the Alberta government. The Alberta government doesn't control education in Lloydminster. Saskatchewan government does under our charter. They're responsible for the education in our city. We know now that, and we always have known that, we have a public and Catholic school system, and taxpayers choose whether they pay for have their taxes go to one school division or the other. That's a choice we have. They decide who they want to support. The question is, with a private school that's not inclusive, who's gonna pay the taxes? Is it the public division? Is it the Catholic division? Or is all of us responsible for those debts? We already pay a premium to have all-inclusive education on both sides of the border to the public and Catholic school divisions, which costs taxpayers extra money. And they're already paying that. The charter is set up to protect people from being over-regulated by one province or the other. And we have a charter that's probably, I don't know how many years old, 70 years old. And it was there for a good reason. To protect the taxpayers of the city and to develop a system that made this city run on the border. When some of the provinces wanted to amalgamate their school divisions, and I should have Councillor Michael talk about this, not me, but they were going to take Lloydminster School Division away, I believe, and amalgamate it with somebody. And the city said, and certainly the school division said, I believe, and I stand to be corrected, Councillor Michael, that it won't work because of the charter. So we have a system in place where taxpayers are paying more than they normally would in the provinces if it wasn't for a joint additional tax to cover balancing the workload on each side of the border. The big problem we got is everybody gets to pay for it, but very few can go to school. Or whatever this organization does. I don't have a handle on what they do, but I understand they provide a curriculum similar to Alberta. Well, that may be, but we work under the Saskatchewan system and none of the rules, and I believe that Alberta has a cap on their education tax. And for us to increase, I know it's not a huge dollar. It's a principle of the charter. If we're going to preempt the charter because one province or other decides to do something, and they might want to change the charter in the future, well, we'll fight that battle when the day comes. We've done it for years and years and years, over utilities and lots of other things. And I think that at the end of the day, how many people are we serving from our city? And the people are going to pay the tax. Are half the people that attend from somewhere else? Are they all from the city? Where are they from? And is it the responsibility of the city taxpayer to be picking up that bill? And who picks it up? The city has worked extremely hard, as I said, for 70 years to maintain this charter. And if we didn't have the charter, where would we be? We would be back at probably 2 city halls, 2 fire departments, 2 of everything. I don't know that. Neither does anybody else in this room. But I think our forefathers, if you want to put it that way, came before us when they decided to make the decision to amalgamate and have the charter drawn up and the provinces agreed. They did the right thing. And I'll say it again, if we can't defend the charter, I don't know what we were going to defend down the road. But I think it's really important that any institution that is not exclusive or inclusive should not be funded by the taxpayer dollar. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Baker. Councilor.
Thank you, Worship. I think it's a little more complex. I think part of the challenge in looking at this issue is that it really is an example of, again, more downloading by provincial governments on municipalities to pay more of the costs. It said back up until 2010, the province of Alberta, just using them as the case in point as an example, paid the triple net to any school division, whether they're Francophone, Catholic, or public, that were renting a space when they did not have adequate school space. And they provided funding to that level. By 2015, that had changed to say that they were creating one pot of money, and then they would distribute it as best they could amongst the schools to lease the spaces. Typically, a Francophone school would occupy a vacated school that was occupied either by Catholic or public made use of those facilities. In our instance here in a community that was not available, so much like other communities as well that have outreach schools, Edmonton Public, Saskatoon, Regina, all across Canada, we've seen the outreach schools reaching students who, for one reason or another, don't succeed in typical high schools, and so spaces were being rented across, basically downtown city streets, malls, wherever they could, and provinces funded them in the same way, triple net, all in, and so as you're seeing the cash crunch come, what we're seeing is all of this being downloaded. With respect to our charter, I guess the question I would ask is where it ranks next to the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. So in 1982, when this was adopted, it became a constitutional right for Francophone parents to have their children educated in French anywhere in Canada. So that comes from the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which says thou shalt do this. It's available and we must provide it, and that's in part what education does. But I think the bigger issue is less about a charter and more about the fact that municipal governments are no longer funding and supporting to the same level they did in the past. And it's not just us, it's every other community in the province that has an outreach school, a Francophone school, any other mode of school. That amount of funding is just not available to them with the change in 2015, in particular Alberta. That's what I'm most familiar with. So this could easily be an outreach school with Lloyd Public coming here to say we want the taxes to be voted on this. So I think it's folly to observe and look at this just from the context of it being either a Francophone, because the request could come from a public or it could come from a Catholic school, and the request would be identical.
Your worship, well, I only have one point to make with Councilor Dychuk. We already pay an upload in the city. Not Saskatchewan, not Alberta. And Alberta doesn't control education in Lloydminster, Saskatchewan does. And we've already been uploaded on our taxpayer already to make unified services across the border. I guess that's what you call it.
Yeah.
For lack of, and that's where I'm arguing. So now we want to put another tax on our taxpayer. And I have trouble with that. And only a few select people can go if you have the right ethnic background. And there's something wrong with it.
But that would be
We can argue this all day, but
no, but that would be a charter of freedoms. Charter of rights and freedoms. I mean, they're guaranteed that in the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Similarly, Catholic education is also guaranteed, not in this, but back, I think, probably in the Quebec Act, where Catholic children were guaranteed the right, if you have the baptismal certificate, that you have a right to practice and go to school in a Catholic school. That's an issue in Saskatchewan, and it's going to go all the way to the Supreme Court of Canada. But those guarantees are in place, and those are people ahead of our time that have put these pieces in place to build this country. But I think, I recognize what you're saying about the tax, and I don't disagree with that. I guess the only piece that I would say is that, while we follow Saskatchewan curriculum, ultimately it is a blended affair between the two provinces. In theory, we get 60% of the funding from Alberta and 40% of the funding from Saskatchewan, because that's the Alberta-Saskatchewan split. We have more students in Alberta, and we follow Saskatchewan curriculum. So we really are at the beck and call of both masters. And in fact, more money comes from Alberta than does from Saskatchewan. So we're supported by both of those programs. And the seamless levy allows us to run all the programs seamlessly, if you like, for citizens on both sides of the border. So, some of the programs offered by Alberta are not offered by Saskatchewan, and vice versa. So the levy offers this without saying, well, if you live on that side, you get this, but if you live on that side, you get that, and if you try to go over there, you can't get this or that. They say we're one city, one spot, and that's the way it works. So I think that's a little misleading, but because we are really a product of both education systems.
If I may, Your Worship, just to clarify a little bit as well, on the Saskatchewan side, the Education Act refers us to the Saskatchewan Cities Act, which says that this property would be exempt to Saskatchewan as well.
Yeah.
So the education, whether it's Alberta or Saskatchewan, it doesn't matter, they will be both exempt. The only place all across Alberta and Saskatchewan that this school is not exempt is in Lloydminster.
I could just close, Your Worship.
From your comments, and then I'll move to, yes.
I was just going to say that Saskatchewan and Alberta have already raised the rate. They put a cap on the mill rate in Alberta, right?
Well, they've actually removed that cap, Councillor.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll be doing
And we want to add another tax for a third unit that is not inclusive. And the Charter of Rights, I don't know about the Magna Carta. I wasn't around, I was just about was, but I wasn't. And at the end of the day, is how do we protect our taxpayers? We sit at this table and we talk about where our money's going, and budgets, and we're worried about costs. And it's a principle, it's nothing to do with that unit. We're opening the door up to anybody and everybody that could put together something, and we'll use an excuse. It says quite clearly in here that the only way we can do this is we waive it. We're not mandated to do it. If it was a great idea, the provinces are paying the capital costs for the units, right? But they're not paying operational costs. No, that's what you said.
No, I think they don't pay property tax anymore, they still pay some operational costs.
Well, the last report I read, and why are they short of funds?
Because they get funding for both sides of the equation. So you have X amount of dollars for your capital program and X amount of dollars for operations.
But what about the people that send their children there? Do they pay a special fee to go there?
No.
Okay, when we bring a student in from the county or the RMs, and they come to our city schools, what do you get? You get nothing.
We don't get a tax on it.
I heard you talk about that just recently.
Yes.
Couple of nights.
We're working on it.
So I think that,
There's something wrong here.
I all mean, you brought up some good points.
We gotta
And
correct it, you know.
I'll address a couple of them, and we'll work around. Councillor Torres.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, just as I thought about this one over the last week and some of Councillor Baker's comments at the last meeting, I probably actually agree more with some of the points around whose Education Act actually applies in Lloydminster as to whether this is established in the school or not. But even at the root level, the Lloydminster Charter is actually a document that belongs to each provinces as much as and it allows us to exist as one municipality. It's our document, but really it's their document. And if there's going to be someone who ends up fighting this, it's going to be our legal costs that end up fighting over this $17,000. And from a financial perspective of what's the best use of the city's funds, I think that we could easily chew up $17,000 if there is a claim for a human rights violation according to the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. We could chew up $17,000 in a hurry versus just allowing this one to go. So from the best way to spend taxpayers' funds, I think that in my opinion, it's a lot more appropriate to let this one go rather than fight it. And also, at the end of the day, it's not really clear to me as to who would be the one representing the city's interest, as the document belongs to the government of Alberta more than it does belong to the city of Lloydminster. So I think we would have it thrown back at us in a hurry after we spent a bunch of money on legal fees to fight this. So I just don't see any long-term value or even short-term value in fighting what's going to be, what is in my opinion, a lost cause. Fighting against what is a public school, that the rights of those individuals is protected under the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. I just don't see why we would fight it any farther.
Councillor Monroe.
I guess when I look at this, I've thought about the past week as well. There's different sides of it. Do I see it as a public school personally? Maybe not. However, both provinces accept this as a school that would be tax exempt, whether it was in Saskatchewan or whether it was in Alberta. As a community, we want to stand unified, and we want to have this seamless delivery, whether it's ambulance services, whether it's anything. So really, this is no different whether it's on the Alberta side or the Saskatchewan side. We should have a seamless delivery, and we're not quite half Saskatchewan, but as well as Alberta, and we need to be representing what those provinces are as well. I mean, what I feel personally versus what the provinces have dictated down, they download so much to us, and really we have to have a little bit of respect for that as well. And as far as our charter goes, it says right in our charter, taking aside from the school, if it's a nonprofit, we as council have the right to make them tax exempt. We're not going against our charter. It is something that's blatantly written in our charter. Am I worried about precedent setting? Absolutely not, because the fact of this situation happening again in this exact layout is nearly almost impossible, I would say. Even if there's a group of people that are homeschooled, they don't have the same rights under the Charter of Rights and Freedom as this Francophone one has been dictated from the federal government. So, I mean, I thought about it quite a bit, but when it comes down to it, there was really not anything in terms of that we can really argue against not moving forward with giving them the tax exemption.
I'll take a kick at the cat. Seemingly, there's a lot of good information you brought forward, Councillor Baker. I appreciate Councillor Torson mentioning the charter because, you know, I'm no expert. I always refer to the city clerk. The charter is, in essence, an act of the two provinces. It represents us, and we live it every day. The only people that live the Charter Act, as it stands in the legislatures of both Saskatchewan and Alberta, are the city of Lloydminster. But that act is their act. We have no ability to update it. We certainly would like to at certain times. We find that it has grown a little bit old due to the changes in the MGA, changes in the Cities Act, as well as occasionally we do find areas that have been noted and do need to be changed. But we don't have the jurisdictional ability as this council to say, we'd like to open the charter today, fix it and clean it up. It is an act that is governed and sent down to us by province. As every municipality in the country, it doesn't matter, you follow the respective municipal government act in each province. If I understand the funding rate from the school, and going back to your point, Councillor Baker, I believe, and Scott, if you can correct me, they would receive money from the Catholic school. If they indicated they were Catholic, that Catholic money would go to their school division. Is that correct?
No.
I'm not sure.
No, I don't think so. I think they get paid per student, the same.
Per student based from the government.
Based on the formula of the
Right,
province.
so, and we are a little unique because of our arrangement with the school boards that we have today in the charter, so okay. And lastly, I believe they are residents of the city or surrounding area, and we know that's again a gray area. People attending this school, I don't think there's anybody being actually bussed in from Lac La Biche every day or anything like that. I believe they're residents of our city. We're challenged because this is a charter of rights and freedoms that is some time ago that plays into this. And as I've understood this, the federal government has pretty much the top of the pile. They pass it on to the province, and we know what happens in the province. It gets shoveled down to us. So as a federal legislation that comes into play here, provincial legislation, and both of them, in essence, gives us indication that everything that's going on meets the law of the land federally and meets the law of the land provincially for a school, that they're a registered school, they're not a private school from that perspective. I can't answer your question, Councillor Baker, if they pay additional fees or not, but they do receive funding from the province of Alberta to provide public education in a specific language of French, is what I understand. So that one I don't know a whole lot more about. It is challenging because if we had the charter open tomorrow, and one of the two school departments of education said we changed this and they closed it, we wouldn't even be at this discussion. We've got a document that's last been updated in 2012, I believe is last time the charter was open. So it's now 8 years old, and from that perspective, so it would have if we'd had it out when the MGA came out, opened in 2015, they would likely updated in Alberta or Saskatchewan, or one of them would have caught it. So I guess that I hear what you're saying, Councillor Baker, about it's a tax, but it is a tax that we pay for every school in our city. And the challenge we've got is that I believe, I don't know, I wasn't here way back when the separate school started. Maybe they started with 25 students and grew to the size that they are today. From that perspective, as Councillor Diachuk said, there's education is constantly under scrutiny of the law as well. It's going to be challenged in the court system. So I'd like to see us try to come to some sort of resolution, and I know the administration has brought forward a resolution today. If the school left that property the end of June, it would be back to being taxable, is what I understand, because it's no longer a school. It's a piece of property, so they're occupying whatever they have, and as Councillor Dychuk said, and that's what I understood, I think that's where Avery School and all the other pieces of schools, once the school boards are done with it, they offer it to the other school board, and I imagine when another school is ready to be closed in this city, it will be offered to the French school, and that will be provided to them to use that facility as such. So as much as I agree with you, the charter, I disagree a little bit from the perspective that we've also been tasked to work with the charter, and it's given us some tools. It's not perfect by any means. I think that from the perspective of all things considered, that it's the students at the end of the day, because if they get better education, because there's more money for education, that's what we all strive for. I think every one of our kids in this city, and that's why we have the seamless education levy, to deliver the best quality education from our perspective, because we pay the taxes to the province that pay for the school system. Every one of us and every taxpayer in this city pays provincial taxes, which no one ever has been able to put a number to it to pay for the education. So I think at the end of the day, it's the students that I hope will benefit from this very action. It is going to be a download, as you said, from the province, and we talked about it, the whole school taxes exemption. We're dealing it now with the provincial government building. They're giving us less money to deal with the snow because we have residents that are employees in the city, or sorry, of the province, and that's deemed of value, so they're not paying as much for the building. So it's an ongoing battle. We're going to get downloaded continuously, and I don't have the answer to that either. We can talk about that outside someday. That's the challenge we have. So from that perspective, I think that for the best interest of the students moving forward, it's where I'm looking at it from. But that's just my opinion. So I'll open it up to Councillor Fank.
Yeah, I kind of echo Councillor Baker's thoughts on that. It is a tax exemption. It's restricted by the charter, and just for the principle of the charter, I would not be in favor of this. I think that it is by, obviously both provinces, but I think we're very unique in this country having that charter, and I would stick by it and not utilize the exemption.
Sure. You keep bringing up new things. First of all, the report says, the charter says, we don't have to pay it.
We don't have to approve the
No,
bylaw.
we don't have to pay it.
We don't have to approve the bylaw. We have the ability.
Yeah, because the province might say they like it, but they're not funding it. And it's being downloaded on the city. And the charter says, the only reason we're talking about this is because it's right in the charter that we're not responsible for it. I could dirty the waters by saying, how about policing? Maybe open the charter and get policing in the charter. If it's not covered well enough, we lose $200,000 a year in policing from one province because they don't have to pay it. So what's the difference? I hate to muddy the waters, but it's...
And I understand what you're saying, Councillor. I think that the discussion, and I think that, and I don't even want, it becomes a charter discussion in a way.
You pay.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. There's no question about it. And I think the problem is, and we'll get to that, whoever is sitting at this table when that kind of charter comes around, we have the ability to have input. At the end of the day, two legislatures have the output.
You're running scared. The charter's here because people didn't run scared. They took up the challenge and fought for the rights for the city. The Cities Act. Why do we got it? Why do we got a cap on mill rate in Alberta? Because the municipalities fought that the provinces were overcharging the municipal property far too much for the education tax, and they dropped it back. Well, I don't have the details, but that happened.
Well, I guess, Councillor, I agree with
But that's
you.
enough for me.
I appreciate it. Councillor, Monroe.
But just a comment, we're not going against the charter. That's what I need to keep reiterating, is that what it says in the charter is that we have the right, if it's a nonprofit organization, to make them exempt from taxes. So we're not going against the charter. We're just utilizing something, a caveat within the charter that allows us to do something. So, I would never want to, we have a charter and it exists for a reason. I wouldn't want to go against that, but we're not in this case.
Councilor Torres.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, just another point that was made that I want to reiterate and maybe reframe is that this is not an issue that we likely will see again in the exact same circumstances that we would apply this tool that's within the charter in the exact same way. I don't think that we're setting a precedent that somehow is going to open a can of worms. I think we are simply using one of the tools within it, and we're talking about really $12,000 because the $5,000 is in and out, and it's not like the city has to pay that $5,000 either way if this property becomes exempt. So for $12,000 is really the price here, and if we want to be served and be considered to be violating human rights of a specific group, we will pay far more than that in a court challenge. So what's it worth to you in something where you will not see the exact same issue again, and you will pay way more than $12,000?
Any further discussion? Looking for direction from council on resolution, or on bylaw, sorry, 05-2020. Councilor Monroe.
That council grant the second reading to bylaw number 05-2020, the FRA GNC Francophone Education Region Property Tax Exemption bylaw.
Seconder. Councilor Torres. Any further questions before I call for the question? Not seeing any, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. To council for direction and recommendation, bylaw 05-2020.
That council grant third and final reading to bylaw number 05-2020, the FRA GNC Francophone Education Region Property Tax Exemption bylaw.
Seconder. Councilor Torres. Any further questions before I call for the final vote? Not seeing any, all in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Thank you.
Thank you, Scott.
Thanks, Scott.
Moving on to item number 8, mayor and council reports. I don't have anything at this time. Anything noteworthy that council wishes to get note of? Not seeing any. I will ask, is there any matters at this time that this council needs to deal with? I will move to inquiries from the media.
Thank you, Your Worship. Today we have media requests for yourself, Mayor Alvarez, Councillor Baker, and Councillor Monroe.
I look to council for direction. To recess. Recess, 7:05. Councilor Fagan, all in favor? Opposed?